This is my paper, Peeling Back the Yellow Wallpaper, by Grace Carr for ENC 1102. Such a story ought not to be written. It was enough to drive anyone mad to read it. This quote was said by a Boston physician in 1891 about Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper, which is widely considered a modern commentary on the undermining of women's mental health struggles hidden under the guise of a fictional short story. Gilman wrote about these issues in the form of a fictional story to shed light on the overarching struggle and discrimination that women faced every day in society. With women's mental health struggles being synopsized to no more than hysteria at the time, Perkins wonderfully illustrated a deep dive into the mind of a woman going through what is commonly theorized to be postpartum depression, and gives an inside look at mental health struggles and treatment plans of the 19th century. By looking at the unethical medical treatment women were receiving, we can see the patriarchal pressures and standards put in place that women were expected to adhere to at the time, as well as an emphasis on the entrapment that these cures led many women to experience. In The Yellow Wallpaper, the treatment the narrator is prescribed, also known as the rest cure, was bed rest with no mental stimulation for days, weeks, or even months at a time. This commonly led to women facing severe psychosis and depression, subsequently resulting in death in many cases. This overarching cure, as it was advertised, serves as a harsh commentary on the medical practices that were widely accepted at the time for the treatment of various illnesses, whether it was mental or physical ailment. This cure was widely popularized by Dr. Mitchell in the 19th century through his book, Fat and Blood, where he claimed that this cured a case of locomotor ataxia. Coincidentally, Charlotte Perkins Gilman's had been described the rest cure by Dr. Mitchell himself shortly after giving birth to her child. This personal connection between Gilman and the treatment makes the narrative all the more powerful and grounded in reality. The arbitrary isolation of the rest cure shines a light on the deeply rooted ideology that women are beings who lack all autonomy and must be told what to do and how to do it because of their fragile state. The rest cure was just another way to forbid women from engaging in anything intellectual because at the time it was not seen as their place in the world, in the words of many doctors or male leaders. The pressures of independence and intelligence were too much for a woman's feeble mind to handle. This view on a woman's place in society relates to the patriarchal lens that most of the world is seen through, as the struggle for equality and inclusion was more prominent than ever in the 19th and 20th centuries with the women's suffrage movement on the rise. Women in the 19th century were seen as a pinnacle of domesticity and purity. The standard had been set in stone for a long time by religious beliefs and social normalities pushed by the church and media. This cold domesticity, as it is often referred to, is the idea that women are homemakers and moral compasses for their children in the home. This ideology is evident throughout the story, especially when the narrator refers to her husband and his position in society in comparison to her own. The narrator's husband, John, is a physician. This furthers his reign over the home and his wife because it is implied that he is of a higher society than the average man. The narrator says things such as, quote, "He is very careful and loving and hardly lets me stir without special direction," end quote. And, quote, "He said I was his darling and that he would do anything for me, but he said I must not work, I must not think," end quote. John, not only being the narrator's husband, but also her doctor, is a great symbol of the power dynamic between genders at the time. This treatment, or the rest cure, meant to heal her, infantilizes her instead, stripping her of autonomy and purpose. Her inability to write or think, imposed by John's directives, highlights the stark contrast between his authoritative role and her constrained existence. The narrator, not being able to express herself out of fear that her husband might shun or be disappointed in her, gives a glimpse at the lack of control that women had, which often led to increased depression and anxiety that was inevitably labeled as hysteria. John's care, which is described under the pretense of love, is another way of implementing power. The narrator says, quote, "I lie here on this great big bed and get so tired of it. I sometimes think I will go mad, and then I think I will write, but I must not," end quote. In this quote, the narrator chooses not to write out of fear and respect for her husband, and she hints at the idea that she would not want to embarrass John or give him a bad reputation because of her nervous actions, therefore putting more pressure on herself. Since women were often not seen as fully functioning members of society and instead were expected to serve as a moral and emotional extension of their husband, reflecting the health and success of their home life. This pressure is palpable throughout the story, as the narrator struggles to appear content and obedient despite experiencing increasing mental distress. Her husband, John, a physician, dismisses her concerns and enforces the infamous rest cure, confining her to a room and forbidding her from writing or engaging in stimulating activities. His well-intentioned but patronizing control reflects the broader societal belief that women were too delicate or irrational to make decisions for themselves. The narrator's mental health deterioration is amplified by this lack of agency and forced domesticity. The yellow wallpaper in her room becomes a symbol of these suffocating expectations. It's confining and impossible to ignore, much like the gender roles she's trapped within. Another harsh reality addressed in the yellow wallpaper is the entrapment one experiences within their mind when they are not provided with proper care for their mental illness. The narrator's struggle is a direct reflection of the entrapment and isolation that many individuals suffering from mental health conditions face, but especially women. It is heavily implied throughout the text that the narrator is dealing with postpartum depression, a serious mental illness that was not widely understood or investigated until much later, well into the 20th century. Postpartum depression can cause an overwhelming increase in depressive and anxious thoughts, affecting many new mothers, and it often goes unaddressed or misunderstood, which only exacerbates their suffering. This specific mental illness is where Gilman's own personal experience becomes significant. In 1885, after giving birth to her first child, Gilman herself struggled with what was then referred to as hysteria or nervous exhaustion. She wrote about her experience in her personal journals, revealing her frustration with the inadequate and dismissive treatments she was subjected to. Like the narrator of her story, Gilman was confined to the rest cure, a treatment that prioritized complete rest, isolation, and inactivity. In the yellow wallpaper, this experience is mirrored in the narrator's own downward spiral. This treatment is a clear metaphor for the oppression that women faced during the time, confined not only physically, as the narrator is locked away in an old nursery, but also mentally, with their emotions and intellect completely disregarded. The wallpaper itself eventually becomes a symbol of the narrator's mental state. At first, she is repelled by its sickening yellow color and patterns, which reflect her growing frustration and anxiety. But as her condition furthers, she begins to fixate on it, and the wallpaper slowly comes to represent her entrapment. She describes seeing a woman creeping behind the wallpaper, and her obsession with this figure grows stronger as she spirals deeper into psychosis. The creeping woman becomes a symbol of the narrator herself. She's physically confined and mentally trapped by the oppressive treatment prescribed to her. The fact that the narrator perceives this creeping woman as someone who, quote, creeps by daylight, unquote, end quote, is significant because it reflects how the narrator feels. She must live in her role as a wife and mother, but she cannot express her true self in the open. She starts to see the woman in the wallpaper as a reflection of her own entrapped self, struggling to escape the constraints placed on her by her husband. Quote, I don't like to look out of the windows even. There are so many of those creeping women, and they creep so fast. I wonder if they all come out of the wallpaper as I did. I apologize for that sound. Despite the severe decline in her mental health, she is able to recognize that she is the one trapped, that she came from the wallpaper just as others did. This can be seen as her coming to witness the institutionalized patriarchy that was in place and affecting all women, including herself, even though it was all too late to save herself. The yellow wallpaper serves as a powerful and unsettling reminder of the oppressive standards under which women were treated and cared for in the late 19th century. The story critiques a medical system that was not only ignorant but also cruel in its treatment of women, particularly regarding their mental health. At a time when women's emotional and psychological struggles were often dismissed or misunderstood, this treatment was driven by both malice and neglect. Gilman's narrative offers a stark and vivid portrayal of the way women's autonomy was stripped away under the guise of medical care, revealing a deep-seated societal belief that women were fragile and irrational beings in need of constant supervision and control. The yellow wallpaper serves as a timeless and powerful critique of the social, medical, and cultural norms that shaped women's lives during the 19th century. Her harsh portrayal of the mistreatment of women and the damaging effects of untreated mental illness serves as a sobering reminder of the work still needed to address gender inequality and the importance of mental health care that listens, respects, and empowers those who seek it.